Hey everybody, James here with Laughing Dragon Foundries. Quick joke for you. How can you tell a level-headed 3D printer? He drools out of both corners of his mouth. Some people, when you say level something, they think of using something like this, a carpenter's level or a torpedo level, whatever you call this. And while this can make sure that things are level with the world, that's not what we're trying to do here. What we're trying to do is make your nozzle equidistant at all different points on the bed, which sets you up for a great foundation, which is the beginning of a great print. I bought printers from Elegoo and from Creality, and they all ship with this little thing called a feeler gauge or a thickness gauge. Quick little tip. You want to make sure that the thickness of your gauge that you're using is half the height or half the thickness of your nozzle width. So for example, I print mostly with a 0.4 width nozzle. This is a 0.2 thickness gauge or feeler gauge. So that's what you want to make sure that you're doing. If your nozzle is too close to the bed, your filament is not going to print. And if your nozzle is too far away from the bed, then you're going to experience a situation where the filament will not stick to the bed. So let's go through the steps that you need to walk through in order to get your nozzle at the right height from the printer bed. All right, so this is one example of a printer that doesn't have a lot of bells and whistles when it comes to its leveling system. Now, fortunately, different printers will have different setups, but ultimately the objective is the same, and that is to make sure that all quadrants of your bed are at the same distance from the printing nozzle right here. This is an Elegoo Neptune 2S. We have a tool here which will allow us to bring the bed to a home point. So I'm going to go ahead and hit that. And we'll wait a second here. Now that the bed is at a home position, I can go ahead and use the leveling function that's built into this printer that allows me to go to each of the 4 points on the bed and then check my distance between the nozzle and the printing plate itself. So I'm going to hit point 1. All right. It's going to now bring that nozzle down to the bed. And I'm going to take my feeler gauge and stick it between the nozzle and the plate. And you can see there's quite a bit of distance here. So what I need to do, I just kind of slide the gauge back and forth until I get a little bit of friction. And now I'm going to hit point 2. And it'll take us over to the next quadrant. Using the same method, I'll slide my feeler gauge in between the nozzle and the print head, and then using this adjustment wheel here, I'll turn it until I get that bed right where I want it, which again is just a little bit of friction between the bed and the printing nozzle. Now let's go to our third point. What we're doing here is called a mechanical level. So we're mechanically leveling the bed first. And last but not least, we're going to go to point number 4. And we'll check the distance there. Again, adjusting the knob until we get just the right amount of drag. I'm going to go ahead and hit point 1 again. I want to show you a quick little trick. If you have a printer that has this built in where you can hit the different points and have it go to that point on the bed, that's great, but for me it takes a little too much time. So most printers that have an interface like this, you can actually go ahead and turn the motors off, so you can then move things around on your own without having to worry about applying undue stress on the motor. Okay, so now I've gone ahead and turned this motor off without moving anything else, and I can now move this bed freely and a little bit more quickly to fine-tune my adjustments. You always want to make sure that you go around the perimeter of your bed and check all points at least twice. Because here's why. If you push down on this front corner of your bed with your screw here, it's going to slightly raise the back corner. So you have to get that, it's a balancing act. So you don't just tune these 4 quadrants just once. You need to go and do it at least a couple times. Sometimes, depending on how far out of alignment it was, I'll actually do it 3 or 4 times, just to be sure. Okay, and the way that you'll know that you've gotten it to a point of where it's in range is that when you move the bed to the next quadrant, it won't need as much adjustment. You'll be able to put your gauge in there, and it'll be just kind of like about where you left it last time. So what we've just done is what's referred to as, again, a mechanical level, where we have physically, mechanically made sure that the nozzle is the same distance from the printing bed all the way around by using one of these. There's some people that will suggest using a sheet of paper. If you don't have one of these, then you can go ahead and do that. But remember this, paper comes in different thicknesses. So you might actually not be getting the right distance if you're using the wrong thickness of a sheet of paper. My experience has been that paper is actually a little too thin. And depending on what kind of bed you have, this is a textured PEI flex bed. The paper might actually push down in the creases of the texture and therefore give you a false reading when it comes to the right distance of the nozzle away from the plate. But here's how you know for sure. If you have a system now that will go ahead and do what's called a mesh level or an auto level, these are typically CR or BL touch systems, or in some cases an inductive leveling system, then you can go ahead and now let the machine do a mesh level on its own. Now we have a Creality, a number of Creality printers here, the CR10S Pro V2, that has a BL touch system in it, and that uses a magnetic probe to go around and check 25 points on the bed to make sure that not only is it level, but also any inconsistencies in the bed itself, be it glass or metal or aluminum, whatever, it can compensate for that on the fly by putting that mesh, those mesh readings into the computer that resides within the printer. If you don't have an auto leveling system to take it to that next step, there's another thing that you can do is I'll go ahead and load filament up into the printer and run that first layer as I'm printing and keep an eye on that first layer to make sure that it sticks and that it's getting the right amount of squish, as it's referred to. That's what we're going to do next. That wraps up getting our mechanical level set on a 3D printer. Now we're going to move into the aspect of making sure that that first layer is perfect. And that's what we're going to cover in our next video. So be sure to like, follow, subscribe, and you'll know when our next video drops, where we talk about getting that perfect first layer and what to look for. As always, I'm James with Laughing Dragon Foundries. Be sure to like, subscribe, follow, all that stuff that you do to make sure that you're in line for the next video when it drops. Keep your filament dry and your hopes high, and keep on praying.